Today I speak from the platform jointly conceived by Tamil Nadu Epic Skill Development Center and Gati Intellect. At Gati Intellect, we are all committed to thinking out of box, straining our cognitive faculties, and come out with experiential learning, which is different, effective, and doable and futuristic. That is why we have given our endeavor today a central theme of Make India Strong. All of future endeavors will be with the underlying consciousness of Make India Strong. Today, seminar is an inaugural session where we will talk on transformational approach to leadership based on Indian concept of thinking. Mark the word Indian concept of thinking. Make India Strong. What really goes into making a nation strong? My research has brought out that there are two ingredients which makes a nation strong. First is knowledge and second is character. The balance, all other things are derivatives of these two denominations. Go back into history. Nations have risen to fundamental places or heights because of knowledge base, which is different, progressive, and sustainable, with the character to pursue knowledge diligently in comprehensive whole manner for the mankind. If we have to make India strong, we need to work on both the denominations at macro and micro level. Let's take knowledge first. Do we know that we sit on the treasure trove of knowledge? Knowledge which is profoundly progressive and sustainable? Unfortunately not. The Vedas and Upanishads we know do exist. But what is contained in Vedas and Upanishads, we are pleasantly ignorant about it, not realizing that there is a lot of wisdom in all these documents. Today, I shall be giving you certain snippets to start with my presentation as to what Vedas and Upanishads are all about.
Yes.
So what makes nation strong? The first is a knowledge base. And let's see what knowledge India has. And the knowledge base which India has is about Vedas. What does Veda means? Veda means in Sanskrit, that is knowledge or wisdom. There are 4 Vedas, as we all aware, Rig Veda, Yajur, Sam, and Atharvaveda. But Vedas are also termed as Shrutis. Shrutis means a knowledge which is communicated and not written down. Reason why it is so? Because this knowledge is anticipated that this was given down when it was a golden age, where the mankind's faculties were so enlarged that there was nothing as writing. Every individual was like a supercomputer. You had to just communicate and it would reach out. So that's the reason the Vedas are also termed as Shrutis. Each Veda has 4 sections. The 4th section is termed as Upanishad, which is nothing but a summary of the Vedas. And these Vedas have 2 types of knowledge. The knowledge, one is known as para knowledge and other is known as apara knowledge or apara vidya. The para vidya is a higher knowledge and apara vidya is a lower knowledge. So if you see, this document actually is nothing to do with religion, which unfortunately we all constitute that is a Hindu scripture, which is not so. It's a scientific scripture which talks of science. As we go along, you'll see for more that what type of science it talks of. Now, when it talks of apara vidya, it refers to lower knowledge, which it calls the knowledge which is comprehensible by the 5 senses. Like what we all read today, management, physics, chemistry, maths, biology, psychology, you name everything. Everything forms part of apara vidya, lower knowledge. Para vidya is a high knowledge, the knowledge which is beyond the comprehension of the 5 senses. And the connect between apara vidya to para vidya is what I call it as spirituality. Spirituality has got nothing to do with religion. Spirituality is a science which connects lower knowledge to higher knowledge. What was higher knowledge 100 years back has become lower knowledge today. For example, this webinar. No one could ever think 100 years back that people could talk and see each other across the continents. But it is happening today. That was apara vidya earlier, which has become a lower knowledge today. So same is it. So spirituality is a connect which we take from lower knowledge to higher knowledge. Just to bring out certain more ambits of Vedas. In Vedic scripture, it is written that we have not one universe, but we have millions and millions of such universes. And each universe has got the sun of respective particular universe. And this sun is not stationary. This sun is revolving around a particular orbit. And around that sun revolves the universe also along with it. And this sun revolves around a bigger sun, which is known as Grand Central or Brahma, around which this particular sun revolves. As this sun of the universe gets closer to the Grand Central, it regulates dharma, the mental virtues. It gets very knowledgeable. And when the sun goes away from the Grand Central, that is the time when the mental faculties of the humankind are very low. Now, this is what the Vedas says. Let's see what the present day science says. Because I remember when I was young in the school, we were taught there were only 9 planets. Sun was stationary, and that's what it all was. But today, the science itself says that we have more than one universe. There are more universes which actually exist. Today, the science has come down to say that the sun is not stationary. The sun also has a dual. It moves around a particular star. And the star is the Grand Central, what we are referring down to. There's gravity, which we all say that Newton had brought it up, that gravitational pull, the law of motions, everything is given in Vedas. Maharishi Kannada in 1633 BC was the first to give out gravitational law from Vedas, picking it up. And if we see the interpretation of his and Newton's are carbon copy exactly the same, which is there. So that is the beauty about this particular knowledge which is there. Now, as per Vedas, the sun which is moving from Grand Center, when it moves away, when it is closest to the Grand Center, that is the time the mankind is very knowledgeable. And that era is known as the Golden Age or Satyuga. And as it moves away and goes to the further end, furthest from the Grand Central, it becomes the Dark Age or the Iron Age, or what we call as Kali Yuga. And as this motion takes place from Grand Central away, it takes 12,000 years to move the furthest point. And these 12,000 years is called as one electric cycle. And as it moves from the furthest closer to the Grand Central, it is termed as another electric cycle, which takes around 12,000 years. So the entire circuit which it takes 24,000 years for it to make a complete circuit. So when the moon or the sun is closest to the Grand Central, the mankind faculties are very sharp and intellect. He's something like a supercomputer. He knows everything, how life has come about, what life is there. And there is a connect with beyond physical, what we say. And as the sun moved away from Grand Central, start moving, it comes into a Treta Yuga, what we call as. At this particular yuga, the mankind loses the divine understanding of the life which is there. And as the sun moves further, it comes into Dwapar Yuga. And when it moves from Treta Yuga, it loses the understanding of divine magnetism. And when it moved from Dwapar Yuga to Kali Yuga, in Dwapar Yuga, the mankind loses the understanding of electricity, flow of energy, and other things. And when it is in Kali Yuga, he can only comprehend things which are with understanding of the 5 faculties what we have. That is see, touch, taste, and all those things which are there. As per the calculation of the Hindu calendar, we have already come into Dwapar Yuga, because in 1799, the sun started moving from the furthest point and started moving closer to the Grand Center. And we have now entered into Dwapar Yuga. And this entry happened somewhere around in 1600. And from 1600 to 1899, there is a cusp period which is between Kali Yuga and Dwapar Yuga. And actual Dwapar Yuga has started from, you can say, from 19th century onwards. We are into a Dwapar Yuga. And as per the writing in Vedas, in Dwapar Yuga, we are supposed to understand what is electricity and flow of electricity, the finer forms of electricity, the finer energy which is there. And actually, we did a research on this. I did a research on this, and very pleasantly, I would like to share this with you. It came out that all inventions which the mankind has done so far have all happened in past 300 years. Since the time we have started moving into Dwapar Yuga from Kali Yuga. If you see on the screen, I've put it down, 1600 AD, William Gilbert discovered magnetic force, observed presence of electricity in all material substances. 1619, Kepler discovered important points of astronomy. 21, Debrel of Holland invented microscope. Newton discovered gravity. Thomas Survey made use of steam engine. And this is all which is present here. And not only this, the other inventions also which have happened, they've happened in past 300 years. And if we see in past 300 years, how this energy, what we've understood is, in past 300 years, what we see, what has come about, that it is in 4 waves that the development has taken place. In wave 1, steam power from lump of coal was brought into use. In the second wave, it was electricity and magnetism which was brought in. And the third wave is the transistors and lasers which was brought in. And the fourth wave, which is very closer to us, is molecular level that we have come down to, finer forms of energy flows, artificial intelligence, nanotechnology, biotechnology. And the latest, all scientists in Russia had got together and they had a deliberation upon this. And in that particular forum, even Sadhguru from India was called. And they were deliberating as to how the technology will move forward and where will it take the humanity in this century and the next century, how it goes. And during that deliberation, what really emerged out was that the advancement in artificial intelligence is going to be so profound that the robots will take over more or less any and everything, whatever the humankind are doing. And not only take over the job of what the mankind is doing, the robots will become self-aware. Their memory bases will be so enhanced that by the end of this century, they will become self-aware. And that is where these scientists actually got down to understand how the humanity and the robots will thereafter exist. There'll be a confrontational path. And this is where Sadhguru came in, very surprisingly. And this is where he brought in the knowledge of Vedas to everyone's understanding. And he said that what is understanding for making a robot is mind, intelligence, IQ. The brain, as per Vedas, has got 16 parts and broadly discovered into 4 parts. And that is known as Manas, Buddhi, Chitta, and Ahankara. And these are 4 big subsets. So as per the Vedas, the mankind needs to start exploring this aspect of it. We need to get within it to understand this aspect so that we get ahead of the robots as we get along into the next century out there. So this is the greatness and the beauty about Vedas. What string theory talks about today of universes and other universes, the Big Bang theory, they are doing away. That Big Bang is not the only way that this universe came. Big Bang is happening everywhere and new universes are getting created. These are all given Vedas. And today, this Professor Kaku, who's a top physicist, who's actually the master of string theory all over the world, is nothing. His knowledge is nothing but just from Vedas, and he swears by Vedas and Upanishads. So this is the greatness of our scriptures which we have gone across. Coming down to the aspect which I just brought last, that the mankind's thought has to improve and grow. We have to understand beyond our understanding of an IQ level of thinking. And this is where we come into it. This is an endeavor to develop our behavioral science in a manner that which tells us how to explore this side of the faculty which has not been explored so far. I have done management courses, and I'm sure everyone has done, and all throughout the management courses, we are taught various types of theories which are there. Behavioral science, situational theory, charismatic leaders, transformation leaders, and so many of theories which have been taught across. And frankly, when I went through all these theories, I realized that there was a lot of lack of understanding in all of them. Just to quote you one little example, it's a live example. We were in Sopur, that's way back in 1999. Yeah. And that's a time we youngsters, we were given a particular thing. Okay, there are terrorists who were there close to a dhaba, that's close to Sopur, we were there. There's a dhaba which is there, and these terrorists are going to be coming there, and you go and nab those chaps at night. So we went along with the team of around 10 guys. We took our weapons and all, wore Firan on the top, and we started moving there. So as per the rules, or as per the teaching, the tactical processes, this team started off with 2 chaps ahead as scouts and the balance guys falling behind. It was pitch dark night, somewhere around 12:30 and 1 o'clock at night. This team approached tactically and came close to this particular dhaba. And as it came close to the dhaba, they saw through their night vision devices, this dhaba was closed and no one was there. As this officer was observing, the NCO behind, he tapped him on his shoulder and said, "Saab, yahan koi nahi hai, let's go back." Ye ho gaya. So the officer thought for a moment and he said, "No, we will explore further. We will go ahead and we'll see, or we will wait for the people. They might come late and we'll explore." So when they were about to move, that is time the officer told the people who were heading up, the scouts, to move back. And he took the lead and he started moving ahead. And as they moved, they must have gone around 800, 900 meters ahead. This NCO who was walking behind tapped this officer on the shoulder and pointed on the right hand side over a telephone pole. At the night, on the sky silhouette, he saw this particular gentleman sitting on top of the pole. Officer quickly realized that they walked into an ambush and they're in for trouble. And before he could challenge, the fire broke out from all directions. And as the fire broke out, the NCO who was behind, he shouted, "Saab, goli lag gaya," and he fell down. As he fell down, the 2 other NCOs who were there, they jumped into a near ditch and they shouted, "Saab, idhar se aao, idhar se nikalte hain." Officer looked down. He looked down to the NCO who had fallen behind. He looked down to these 2 gentlemen, or these 2 soldiers who had jumped into the ditch. He made a split-second decision and he turns toward the place from where the fire was coming and he charged with full gusto. And seeing him, the balance of the people also followed behind the charged. The whole firefight must have lasted around 3 minutes or so. When the fire came to a still, they realized that they knocked down 2 terrorists. The NCO was injured. He got a bullet wound, and in this bargain, the officer also suffered a bullet wound. Now tell me, any theory, any concept which has been propagated so far tells us why this officer did what he did? None of them. Let's take the example of Wing Commander Abhinandan. This is a story which is known to everyone. He was at Srinagar base and he was in charge of MiG-21s. Now, if I have to put into layman terms, MiG-21 and F-16, which Pakistanis have, is something like comparing a Mercedes car with a BMW. So, Wing Commander Abhinandan was in charge of aircraft which was like an ambassador. And when the Pakistanis approached, they came with such huge wave that all our top-line aircrafts along the Punjab border were taken across to counter that particular wave coming. 2 aircrafts of Pakistanis, that is F-16, they were coming through Rajouri side. And that's a time we didn't have very good aircraft to counter those aircrafts. So that's a time Abhinandan and his partner was ushered in and said, "Okay, go and block those guys." They flew in immediately from Srinagar and they went to block there. And as they were closing in, they realized, the person at the base or the leadership at the base realized that this particular duel may not be of equal value. They asked them to de-link. But by the time Abhinandan had already gone in confrontation with these aircrafts, by chance he could manage in a flick of a moment to lock onto one of F-16s. And by the time he got this message that you de-link and move back, he overlooked that statement and he knocked down F-16. And as he knocked down, knowing very well the other F-16 will track on and take it on. And same thing happened. The moment he knocked down F-16, the other F-16 caught on him and shoot it down. Thereafter, a story is well known to everyone. Now tell me, why did Abhinandan did what he did? Knowing very well that he'll be shot down. He was an inferior machine and he had orders to move back, yet he didn't do it. Now these are complicated things which none of our theories really answer it out. And that's where my understanding comes in. That today's, or rather the Vedic understanding comes in. In today's understanding of all Western concepts, talk of tangible leaderships. It's something like you read about an individual. It's like an after-action report. You deliberate upon certain points and say, oh, these are things which a leader must have. Whereas Vedic leadership says No, you must work on intangibles. Tangibles are an ultimate offshoot of it. They will happen. If you are not confident, no matter what you do, you can never be a confident guy. But if you work on your intangibles, you definitely become confident. This is the thing which is different from present day understanding of the Western concept and the Vedic way of leadership, which is the intangible. So we shall be talking about the intangible traits as we go along. Now, what are these intangibles? So before I come down to intangible traits, there's a big technology which we have been able to drive at. Maslow's hierarchical theory of needs. Now, this is the mother of all management theories. This is the first thing which is taught across the world. And what is this theory? This theory is nothing. It is a pick from Greek philosophy as well as Vedas. Now, Maslow's hierarchical theory says that to motivate any person, he has certain needs which should be met on. He has psychological needs, safety, love, belonging, esteem, accomplishment, which will lead him to self-actualization or achieving one's potential. And now what does Vedas say about this? This has been picked up from Vedas. Vedas say every mankind has a goal. When he comes onto this earth, he has a goal. And what is a goal? He says the goal is that dharma, artha, kama, moksha. That any person who has come on this particular planet and he has to live, he has to work for his securities and survival. That is artha, which he must. And when he works, he has to keep the denomination of dharma in mind. Kama. Kama is importance and belongings or pleasures or whatever extent you want. A bigger house, bigger car, bigger money, bigger industries and other things. Fine. That is all also good. But again, when you do kama, it should be based on dharma. If your artha and kama are based on dharma, then only will you get moksha, that is self-actualization. Now, if you see Maslow's hierarchical theory completely misses out on dharma. The intangible force which keeps you in check, he has missed that out. He's only worked on tangible characteristics. And that is the reason, if you look back today to the world, and I think COVID has brought the entire hypocrisy of leadership in open, what we are and how we are. It is primarily because the thought process of working on tangibles and reaching up on organizational goals, how you reach, it doesn't make a difference. Tangible characteristics of the way present understanding is there, we have to go beyond into intangibles. And this is where the Indian concept, which we are trying to espouse out, is we'll be talking of. Now, next question comes in is, what are these intangibles we are talking of? The intangibles are three: body, mind, and soul. Body is a grosser form which is visible, and we can see and we can feel, we can know that what body is. Mind is a little subtle thing. We know there is mind, but how it is, where it is not known. The soul, which is the finest of all, we really wouldn't know they exist or not. So let's do one test to identify these three particular components. In the test, now what I suggest you do is that you select a name, any name. It could be Ram, Rahim, anything. It could be any name which is there. Select one name and you have to chant within yourself, in your mind, with eyes closed, 40 times exactly. I say again, you have to chant that particular name for 40 times exactly. The rules are that you do not take any external help to count. Don't use your fingers or use a pen or something to think. You must chant within and make a count within that it is 40 times. And also ensure that no thoughts come in your mind. I say again, select a word, chant within yourself 40 times. No external help to be taken for chanting or counting the particular word. Ensure that no thoughts come in your mind, right? Now what I'll do is I'm sharing certain points and just trying to identify your experiences closest to which of the points. The first is I repeated the word exactly 40 times silently in my mind, and during repetition, no thoughts came in my mind. Second is I repeated the word exactly 40 times, but some thoughts came to my mind. I repeated the word exactly 40 times, but could not do it in first attempt as some thoughts popped up in my mind and I lost counting. I finished in second, third, or whichever attempt. In my second, third, and nth attempt, no thoughts came to my mind. The next, in my second, third, or nth attempt, some thoughts came to my mind, but I did not forget the count and repeated exactly 40 times. And the last is, I could not complete counting. In every attempt, thoughts kept coming, and every time I lost the count. How many people are closer to the first point? Please raise your hand. Okay. And how many people are closest to the last point? Please raise your hand. Good. It doesn't make a difference as to which point you're closest to. What really emerges out when you were doing this particular exercise, your body was at still, it was doing nothing. Your mind was put to count and to ensure that the word is repeated 40 times and the count is kept in time. Then what was it within you which was giving you a final result, whether the thoughts are coming in or not coming? There was something third within you which was giving you the final result. There was something within you which told you you are closest to one of these options which have been given down. Gentlemen, that's the third voice within you. This is the third voice which is always and every time within you, which tells you what is right, what is wrong. This is the one which actually we need to work upon, and that is what we call as body, mind, and soul balancing. If your body, mind, and soul is balanced, you produce positive output. And if there is a disbalance, that is what produces the negative output. Let's understand this with a little example of a typical thing. We all from joint family. There's a family. Evening, lady lays the food on the table. The children come on the table. The head of the family comes and occupies the space. The grandparents also come in and they occupy the space. And they all start having food and the conversation starts. The son makes demands for a mobile. He's in a school. The father says, no, you're in a school right now. No question of you getting advanced phone. And moreover, I'm busy. I'm actually starting a new venture, so don't bother me out. The lady turns back and says, we haven't been out. I've been working day in, day out. I want a holiday. So the husband says, listen, right now there's a year ending. I've got income tax returns to fill and we're starting a new venture. I don't want to splurge money around for things. And moreover, I don't have time to do any of those things. So this conversation starts getting a little bit heated in argument. Seeing this, the grandfather intervenes and he turns back and says, son, don't worry. You take my mobile. It's also got a good camera and everything. It's a reasonably a good mobile. You take my mobile. And he turns towards the lady and says, look, there's a marriage by the end of this particular month, a family marriage. You'll be going there. From there, you can sneak in and go up the mountains and spend a few days. Listening to this particular aspect of it, the son gets more satisfied. The lady is also more or less satisfied. The conversation develops into a positivity and everyone leaves the table with a positive frame of mind. Now let's analyze a second situation. Same situation, same thing. Everyone comes and occupies the space. The lady is there. The son makes a demand for a mobile phone and says, I want it. Father says, no, it is not feasible. The lady demands for an outing. He says it's not feasible. And when the grandfather intervenes, that's a time the head of the family turns back and says, Papa, aap rehne do. Ye aap hi nahi inko bigada hai. This is your love which has spoiled them and I will sort this out. And he quietens the grandfather. And he tells son, you will not get it. The son makes a further increment and says, no, I want it. He gets up and gives a jab to him. The moment he sees that, the lady also jumps from the table and leaves it off and says, every time it lands up into this. What has happened? The same thing, but the conversation has gone into a negative spiral and it broke the communication. Why? Understand the body, understand the family as a body. Body which makes demand. I want this, I want a phone, I want to play, it's hot, it's cold. All those demands which are made by the body. The mind is an intelligent quotient which understands this is a demand, how do I meet it? Right, wrong, logical. No phone, no phone. I'm busy, I cannot go out. So it's a logical interpretation of particular problems which are coming in. Now the grandfather who's there, he understands the IQ or the logic of the head of the family, that why is he denying this particular demand which is input. And he understands the emotional quotient of both the people, that the son and the wife, that what they're going through. He balances the IQ and the EQ of it, and he produces a third energy, which actually gives him the positive antique. This is exactly what it termed when I say balancing of body, mind, and soul. And if the body, mind, and soul are balanced, you will have positive output. you will have success. Your decision making in any of the spheres are going to be far, far superior than anyone else. You will be a person to reckon with. Next question comes in is, if you have to balance a body, mind, and soul, how do we balance this? Or before I go to that, let's see what the present day science has to say about this body, mind, and soul. Because again, when you talk of soul and everything, everyone thinks, oh, it's gone into metaphysics. It isn't so like this. The Vedas are very scientific document, and it is proven by the present day science which is there. Let's say what present day science has to talk about. We have all heard about IQ, EQ, and SQ. IQ is the left side hemisphere of the brain, and EQ is the right hemisphere of the brain. When the right IQ and EQ are balanced, it produces an SQ. This is exactly what it is. The IQ, when body made demand, IQ made an assessment of it. The grandfather came, he balanced the EQ into this, and what he produced was the SQ. This is exactly what it is. Even the present day science also talks of this particular aspect. And if we cut out the body, mind, and soul, what actually it implies that we need to work on avenues by which we can get the intelligent quotient and the emotional quotient to work together. Thereby, we produce a third force, which is far superior and comprehensive whole, and better understanding is provided to us. Let's play a little exercise on this. What I'm going to do is I'm showing this particular screen to you. If you have a paper, draw these dots onto your screen. I put 9 dots, 1, 2, 3, I've numbered them and put 9 dots. Now you can put them onto your paper. And what you have to do is, the rule is that you have to connect all dots. 1. Second rule, that once you put the pen down, you cannot lift it. And the third rule is that you get 4 chances to connect all the dots. I say again, first is that you have to connect all the dots. Second is, once you put the pen down, you can't lift it up. And third is, you get 4 chances to connect to this. Okay, let's move forward. The answer, if you see, I'll flash it on the screen, is 1 chance, 2 chance, 3 chance, 4. What really happens? This is exactly what we're trying to bring out. This exercise, the moment I told you, I gave you 3 rules to follow. The 4th of putting yourself, boxing it into these particular lines, was put across by you. Why? It was because you were thinking from left side of your brain, only from IQ. The moment you think only from the left side of the brain and IQ is predominantly high in you, in that particular case, you automatically box yourself into a confined thinking. If you get your emotional quotient, that the right side of the brain into it, it will give you an ambit to go beyond. And this is exactly what the exercise says. If you are thinking from both sides of the brain, you will go beyond and think. Just imagine if during an exercise, as you live across, if you got this understanding of IQ and EQ, your understanding is profoundly bigger and better than anyone else. This will make your decision making and being a leader of any other place far, far better than what exactly you are following today. Next thing comes in is, if IQ and EQ are to be balanced, that is the thing, that is body, mind, and soul have to be balanced. So what and how do we do that? As for Vedas, every individual has 3 types of energies which are always predominantly available in their body. It is known as Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. Tamas is a negative sort of energy, not rightly to say negative, but yes, it's an energy which gives you a negativity more. It brings in sleep. If the level of tamas goes up in you, it brings in laziness, lethargicness, habitual procrastination, loss of interest. And if it goes further up, it can lead you to depression and suicidal tendencies, or violence to self. Now, these are things, if you see, they must have seen certain people who have this habit. They're always very lazy, lethargic, always wanting to say, okay, we'll do it tomorrow. Let's do it the day after. Not very urgent. Is it so good? We'll do it later. So those are the people who actually have a high amount of tamas in them. The next energy level which comes is Rajas, brings in activity. You must have seen certain people who are always fidgety, always hands moving around, they're moving, and particularly in children you see. It is because of high level of Rajas. And what does it happen if you have those? It brings this restlessness in body. One cannot sit still. It's bombarded with thoughts. It brings in impatience and indecisiveness, anger and aggression, and in extreme case, offensive to others or violence to others. And once Rajas and Tamas, these two energies are balanced within your body, it brings in Sattva. And what is Sattva? Sattva is purity, beauty, peace, joy, enthusiasm. Just visualize the whole day how you spend. You get up in the morning, you move out in the balcony, it's beautiful sunshine, birds chirping, sun is rising up, streets are empty, lovely breeze is blowing, you enjoying a cup of tea, and you're feeling very good. There's beauty, peace, joy in you. Why? Because that is the time when the sattva level is high when you wake up. And when the sattva level is high, and that particular time someone says, okay, you have to move out. You're getting late for your office. And the moment you get back and you realize, oh, you got late, all of a sudden there's a jitteriness starts off. Why this jitteriness starts off? Because Rajas level starts going up in your body. As you reach up office, you reach late and the colleague says, oh, the boss is angry. He says that you're coming late perpetually every day. And he walks in with a little fear and the boss calls him in the office and says, listen, this particular project we just put up, it's half-cocked. We've got a lot of errors into it. So please see into it and do a little better job in future. He comes back and he's dejected. The boss has criticized him. He said his job isn't very good. Why? And he becomes negative. The tamas level starts going up. And by the time he finishes the office, he gets back. The wife waits there with a cup of tea, waiting. And the moment children comes shouting around, he gets agitated and shouts at them. Why? It's a high level of tamas which is there. So if you see the entire day how it goes, the energy level keeps moving up and down and up and down. And these energy levels, how they are in your body, reflects the way you are and you present yourself to others. Let's analyze this with the present-day science, what it has to say. The power of the brain, as of today, it says it's got beta, alpha, theta, delta waves. It's got gamma waves also, but these are the major waves which are there in the brain. Beta waves are 13 to 25 cycles per second, and this brings in intense mental activity, very close to what we talked of Rajas. Alpha waves, frequency 8 to 12 cycles per second, state of quiet and resting alertness, very close to what we called as Sattva. Theta waves, frequency 4 to 8 cycles per second, seen in younger children or during emotional stress in adults, which is very close to Tamas. And if you see, Vedas says that theta waves and the beta waves, or the Rajas and the Tamas, when they are equal, it produces what? Sattva. And if you see the alpha waves, they fall between the frequency between beta and theta waves. So that's the closeness which actually comes down. Let's see the complete brain wave, human wave. Top is a gamma wave, which actually I didn't bring it out there because gamma waves is something which is seen in very few people in the world. This particular brain waves is in the people who actually reached a very high level of meditation level, where high level, intense level is there. And as per Vedas, when you get into this frequency, you're very close to super consciousness. And delta is the lowest particular brain wave. This is also connected to a certain amount of spirituality, where it says when you're closest to lower conscious, that's the time this type of waves come in. But for a normal person, it's theta, alpha, and beta waves. These are the waves where we keep moving up and down. So as per the science, what are the characteristics of alpha waves? They increase concentration and makes person alert. It synchronizes the right side and the left side of the brain, relieves anxiety and reduces stress. It strengthens immune system, and not to miss, it reprograms our inner conscious level. Now this exactly is what the Vedas are talking about, the alpha waves. And if you were to do a little bit of research, which we did, alpha waves, Einstein, when he was at his peak, his brain was also analyzed, and they realized that when Einstein came up with the theory of relativity, the alpha waves are maximum in his brain. Watson and Crick, when they came out with the DNA sampling, that's a time they realized that the alpha waves are maximum in his brains. Mozart, the composer of the music, the Russian guy, when he composed music, the alpha waves were maximum in his brain. So alpha waves bring in productivity. It brings in a bigger understanding and a better understanding of things. This is one of the ways how success can be measured out. Let's see If these waves are so important and have to be worked upon, how do we work upon this that we manage our Rajas, Tamas, and Sattva within us? To work upon Rajas, Tamas, and Sattva, or beta waves, theta waves, and alpha waves, we need to work on two aspects. One is character, and second is willpower. Now, what is character? This is something which I did a lot of research because a lot of definitions are available all across. And I came across Swami Vivekananda literature, and that's where I picked up this phenomenal definition of character. As per Swami Vivekananda, it says, character is but the aggregate of his tendencies, the sum total of bent of his mind. What is character? It's the sum total of the tendencies of you. Whatever is your bent of mind. From morning till evening, what you do, if you take an aggregate of that particular thing, that's your character. Let me give you one little exercise to do to understand and measure your character, what you are. Be truthful to yourself. This is an exercise for your own self. What you do is, today when you go to sleep, before going to sleep, take a paper, draw 3 columns on it. On column 1, write, gave me good feeling. On column 2, write, did not give me good feeling. And column 3, write, neither good feeling nor bad feeling. And start analyzing what you did from morning till evening. Got up in the morning, I went out, did exercise. How did I feel? Good. So under good feeling, put 1. I was doing exercise, I was having a cup of tea after that, and all of a sudden a call came. My mother shouted out, she says, you're getting late for the office, you have to move quick. And I quickly went in there, I got dressed, and the moment I was dressing up, I realized that I was very late, so I skipped the breakfast and left. The mother was telling, please have your breakfast and go. I said, no, I'm getting late, and left the breakfast on table and left. How did I feel? Not good. Put 1 under that, not good. I moved out. There was a sentry standing there. He wished me. I didn't turn and said anything to him and went ahead. How did I feel? Not good. Put 1 there. I was driving down and there was a red light. And I found that not much of traffic was there. I jumped the red light and went across. How did I feel? Not good. Put 1. I reached up office. And so whatever you have done, do all those things and keep putting that 1 under the respective head, what you have felt and how you have felt. Now, all places where you felt good, give +1. All places where you felt not good, give -1. And places which you felt that was neither good nor bad, give -0.5. And now make a sum aggregate of the whole thing. See where your total rests. I've done this particular exercise with a lot of people around. And let me tell you, the truthful exercise, when you do it, it's really difficult to get your score into positive. It may range from 5 to 10 in the positive side. Otherwise, a lot of people are on the negative side. Why? Because we do so many things from morning till evening, which actually it's not good. You're not feeling good, but yet you're going ahead and doing it. And this is the sum total, is the character what we're doing. And to build the character, how do you go about building this character? I suggest the power of 4 P's. Power of faith, power of conscience, power of fear, and the power of energy. Power of faith. Power of faith, the Vedas says, which I brought out earlier, that every mankind has a goal. Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. That's the power of faith. If you have come on this thing, you've got to work for your securities, you've got to work for your pleasures, do that, but it should be based on dharma, righteousness. And then can only reach moksha, self-actualization or self-realization, which is there. And if we now bring it from that angle, bring it down smaller, or rather onto the national level, every nation has a constitution. That constitution is nothing but the power of faith. Have faith in that. Abide by the constitution. No constitution can ever be wrong or bad. Every constitution has good in it. Go by that constitution. And now come down smaller from their nation. It's your organization. Every organization has a power of faith. A faith which is developed, a constitution which is given down. Like in the army, the constitution which is given down to the officers is 3-bit. Every officer, when he passes out, he is told, that the honor, welfare of your nation comes first, always and every time. Honor, welfare, and comfort of your men whom you command comes next. Your welfare, your comfort comes last, always and every time. Now that's the power of faith, which an officer, when he passes out, he develops this particular thing and comes. Similarly, your power of faith is also there in the family, what we call as sanskars. So there is definitely a power of faith. We must abide by it and follow it religiously and diligently. Next comes power of consciousness. What I told you, the grandfather who's there within you. Don't let him die. Don't let him subside. Arouse him. He must talk to you more. You must talk to him more. And that is where the power of conscience comes in. The third is power of fear. You must have fear. Fear of losing the faith. Fear of losing the consciousness. Fear of bringing bad name to your nation, bad name to your organization, bad name to your family. This fear, if it is not there, you are bound to be a man of dubious character. And last and not the least is the power of energy. You have to be physically strong and mentally tough to have the character, to board the character on your shoulders. The people who are weak have got physical weakness, they've got illness. They can never have a sound character because they are always and every time thinking around the problems what they have. So you have to be mentally and physically strong to develop a faith. Once you have developed 4 powers of 4P, the 5th power comes automatically. That is the vision. And what is vision? Vision is the intuitive insight into cognitive thinking. What you think, which brings in a 3rd dimension, goes things beyond, that's vision. Like small little exercise what we did. That was the vision which actually is there. The 3rd aspect of it, emotional quotient, and the IQ and EQ, when it is balanced, it brings in SQ. That is what exactly is the vision, the wisdom, the 3rd aspect. And when you have these characters of 4P balanced, you get vision. And that is what the character is all about. Now let's analyze the 2 instances which I told you at the beginning of the talk. And let's see how those people behaved, why did they behave in the manner they behaved. Let's take the first case. The officer who went to nab the terrorist. When the officer left the unit and he was moving up, as per the given norms, tactically he had 2 people ahead and following behind, and they reached up. When they reached close to the dhaba, and that's a place when they realized that no one was there, the NCO tapped and let's go back. The officer could have gone back. Why did he continue to move forward? It was the power of consciousness. The power of consciousness within him told him, no, it's not about black and white. No one will ask him a question if he goes back. But he himself will never be able to sleep right. He knows that he could have done better. He didn't do it. It was the power of consciousness which prodded him to go ahead and explore further. As he was moving ahead, he told the people who were moving ahead to move back, and he said, I'll take the lead. Why? Why did he do that? That was the power of the faith. The power of the faith, which I told in army, it is taught. The honor, welfare of your country comes first, then it's your men, and then you. So he knew that earlier the job was given, I was doing it as per the given norms. But now I am taking the decision of moving forward. And if I'm taking a decision, I should be the one to be right in front of the harm if something happens. I can't let other people be in the harm of it. And that's how he put himself ahead, and he put the people to follow behind. And as they moved ahead, when they saw the person and the fire broke out, the NCO got wounded and he fell. The 2 NCOs jumped down into the ditch and they asked him, let's escape from here. He didn't do that. Why? It was the power of fear and the vision, the sum total of all the things which came simultaneously together. Simultaneously, when it came, it says, how can I go back from here? How can I leave this NCO who's wounded? He can't run away from here. How can I go back? If I get back to my unit, my people will say, you went to nab the terrorist and you got injured and come back. How can I get a bad name to there? At the fraction of that second, the vision came in and he turned towards the enemy side from where the maximum fire was coming, and he charged. And when he was charging, when he went ahead, he was himself hit on the foot. But still he continued to run. Why? It was the power of energy. So if you see, it's a character of an individual which decides how he behaves. And this character is the one which actually makes the energy levels within you, the beta, theta waves and alpha waves which are there, Rajas, Tamas and Sattva. And when those are balanced, your character gets balanced. The body, mind and soul gets balanced. And when that body, mind and soul gets balanced, your vision, which is coming part of the character, is a comprehensive whole and gives you the best possible decision making, which no other thing can give it down. Next thing comes is the willpower. What is the willpower? Willpower, if you have to define, as for me, it is the positive and the creative function of mind, which impels, propels, and enables us to do a chosen activity in a definitive way and avoid doing an unchosen action in an equally definitive way. It's a force which has to be on the positive side. And also not only on the positive side, to ensure that you do not go on the negative side. Character is wavering always. It is high, low, high, low. Like I'll call you one example. There was one officer, when he was young, absolutely upright and truthful. The CO of a unit happened to use his vehicle for his private work. He went and held complaint to the next boss and said, oh, this person is using it for his personal thing. He's used the vehicle. And it's not a correct thing. He was upright, rock solid, rammed rod straight. The same individual, when he rose up in life, came to sensitive appointments. It was anticipated that he had something to the tune of around 30 to 40 crores he made beyond. So what it brings out, the character is something which is wavering. It goes up and down. What sustains character is the willpower. The willpower is a force, is a positive and a creative force which impels, propels, and enables us to do a chosen activity in a definitive way. And when you do a chosen activity in a definitive way, the character remains where it remains. So the willpower is a very important aspect in life to sustain your character at a point where it should be. This brings out why Hitler was Hitler and Mahatma Gandhi was what he has done. Hitler, if you go back and read his biography or other things, he was also a man of great character. He brought up the nation, which after First World War was in doldrums. And from there, he picked it up, galvanized the whole nation. But when he got that particular thing and reached up to a point, the willpower, instead of being positive, became negative. He wanted to rule over. He wanted to conquer everything. And that's where the negative willpower brought him to where it came down to. Mahatma Gandhi, again on the same lines, but his willpower was strong and he projected a great character. And ultimately, he got independence without firing a bullet. That's the difference which is there. So if you see, we all want wealth and pleasures. It has to be based on righteousness. Once it is based on righteousness, it releases a positive force which sustains the character. So willpower has got two strands of darkness and strands of light. And these strands, whichever you choose, develop your thought, and that actually takes you to the end state. So what really emerges is that if you have to have a character, it has to be sustained by a strong will force. So if we were to sum up what we have gone through so far, it's a character and willpower which needs to be worked upon. If we work upon a character and willpower and develop this these two aspects, the IQ and EQ gets balanced. And when IQ and EQ are balanced, it produces the SQ or the Sattvic or the alpha waves in your brain. And if you have alpha brains or Sattvic energy more in you, you are bound to have a balanced body, mind, and soul. And if you have a balanced body, mind, and soul, you are bound to be a man with a great decision-making capability, a tractor, and sort of a role model for all the people to go ahead. Success is definitely bound to come to you. You will read a righteous path and not only be leading up, you'll be a man to reckon with that in future. So all this together, if we see the levels which are there, there's a bandwidth which actually comes down. The body, mind, and soul, the Sattva, Tamas, and Rajas which is there in your body has got a bandwidth. And this bandwidth is what we got to work upon. And that is worked upon by character and willpower. So what are the takeaways? If you follow this, if you get across to understand balancing of this, what you do, you embrace a strategy to overcome obstacles to success. You infuse a can-do attitude to inspire positive change. You energize team members to embrace major change initiatives. You can infuse can-do attitude to inspire positive change. Fuel momentum for growth. Energize team members to embrace change with ease. Innovate to generate excitement and prevent complacency. Breach dove silos and increase communication. These are just a few takeaways. And not only that, there's certain intangible takeaways which you follow this particular aspect, you'll realize that it's not only you, it's your family, your children, the people around you, everyone gets initiated into a positive spiral wherever you are. My little thought, a leadership strategy without ethical clarity produces moral and economic bankruptcy. Ethical clarity is what? Is what we just discussed. It's the balancing of your intangibles. If they're not balanced, you will produce moral and economic bankruptcy. Understanding success. Let me bring this particular thing. The Stanford University had done this particular study. And what it emerged out of that they said, let's analyze success. And they put two denominations to it, that success is actually as per the domain expertise and soft skill. And they got all the students who had passed out and who were into various walks of life and told them to rate these two aspects, what was more important in success, what they had achieved. And when the results came, as a domain is the knowledge of chosen field, and soft skill is the ability to handle stress, interpersonal skills, confidence, decision-making, clarity of thoughts and goals, and setting extra. So what actually you see, the domain knowledge is a tangible understanding of mankind. And soft skills are the intangible understanding. So when the result came, what it emerged was that people said the domain knowledge, only 12.8% people said the domain knowledge was the reason of the success. And 87.5% people said it was a soft skill which actually got them success for where they were. And the time and effort put, 93% of the time and effort and the money was put on achieving the domain knowledge. And less than 7% was put across for soft skill. And this is what the Vedic study is all about. We are talking of soft skill. Start working towards soft skill. If we have to confront the robots in the next century, we need to develop our soft skills, dive deep into us and bring in a consciousness into a loud sound so that we start understanding more of it. So what emerges is success. For that you require intangible are required for success. If I were to quote certain top business leaders, various leaders, if you read through on the screen, what emerges loud and clear is that everyone is again talking of intangibles, intangible characteristics, deceit, ethics, ethical standards, positive culture, honesty. Everyone is talking of the same. But in all our teachings, this side intangible aspect is never brought in forefront. My thought, before I part it out, there must appear a spiritual and moral leadership rising above economic and political situation. We cannot make peace by mere appeal to greed. We must give people something to live for as well as something to live on. The spiritual and moral is what I'm referring down is to the spirituality. It's of a knowledge connecting between the Aparavidya and the Paravidya. If you have that understanding to connect this lower knowledge to the higher knowledge, you will rise above the economic and political situations and the greed. And when you rise above, you will give something to the people to live for and live on. Live for is what? Reaching self-actualization. The 4 goals which have been given in Vedas. And live on dharma, to be able to reach to the spirituality top, that is self-actualization or the moksha. And that is what exactly is my thought which I leave behind with everyone around. This is my understanding as for Vedic leadership. What a leadership is there. Leadership is an influence of personal power. It's your personal power. And how do you develop personal power? It is your intangible in within. Once you develop that, this power is what creates progressively advancing community towards common purpose. Leadership is not about your organization or something. It has to be a comprehensive whole. leading to a common purpose. Again, bringing this up, dharma, artha, kama, moksha. Common purposes, self-actualization or moksha. And you use your personal power to get the communities up, everyone up, to reach up to moksha. That is, to my understanding, is what leadership is all about. Let's see. The way you are you moving to success? Okay. Let me give you a small little way forward how to do things in your day-to-day life every day. First thing what I give down is the 20-20 formula. And what is that? 20 minutes of move, 20 minutes of reflect, and 20 minutes to grow. When you do exercises, there's a certain amount of hormones which are secreted. Cytosols, neuroportin, dopamine, serotonin. These are the hormones which are good hormones, which help you develop more alpha waves in your brains. When you do exercise, 20 minutes of exercise or yoga you must do every day in the morning. When you do, such hormones are secreted, which increases alpha waves in your mind. Reflect 20 minutes. Talk to yourself. After having done exercise, sit down and talk to yourself. When you talk to yourself, you balance your left side of the brain and the right side of the brain. And after having done that reflection or the meditation, what we also refer to as, thereafter grow for 20 minutes. And how do you grow? Is read a book. Not on a mobile or a laptop or a tab. It should be a hardbound book. And preferably, which gives you some sense in life. And once you do this particular thing, you are bound to be starting your day with high level of alpha waves, with high level of sattva. And that is what will become gradually your base frequency, and you will grow from one stand to another and better decision making in life. The second is freedom from distraction. Internet is not free. We are free. You must realize this particular aspect. The more you get on to mobile, you are actually harming yourself, because such hormones are secreted, which actually leads to various illnesses which will come in. It actually distracts your mind. It actually takes you more closer to your IQ. It takes you a little away from your EQ level. And balancing of the IQ and EQ becomes a little difficulty in case if we manage or spend too much time on this electronic gadgets which are there. 3 steps to success formula, what I call as better awareness, better choice, better results. If you start working on your character, which a formula which I gave you, you must ensure that from the positive side or the negative column, all habits must come into the positive side. This will give you better awareness and better choices. And once you get this better awareness and better choices, you are bound to get better results. And last is the habit installation protocol. If you say, I'm going to start tomorrow, don't take it that it'll become part and parcel of you and it'll become permanent with you. No, it doesn't. It takes 66 days of this installation process. It's 22 days of destruction and 22 days of installation and 22 days of integration. And then it becomes an automatic point, a self-reflected thing which actually starts emerging. These are certain broad guidelines which are given, not necessarily it takes 22 days, but this is a reference point which I'm giving now. So do not just say, oh, I've started off, I'm now good for it. Make sure that you do it for around 2 months consecutively, and then yes, it'll be part and parcel of you. Thank you, gentlemen. I have finished with this.